In Ecuador, the ninth consecutive day of protests in the framework of a national strike continues amidst heavy police repression, more raids, and armed attacks on peaceful demonstrators. Former Brazilian President Lula da Silva and former Governor Geraldo Alckmin, running mates for the nation's presidential election, presented the guidelines of their government program. Britain's railway workers began the biggest strike in more than 3 decades as the cost of living caused by surging inflation risked wider industrial action. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. As the national strike in Ecuador moves into its 9th consecutive day, social organizations denounce repression against protesters, while different sectors of society join the rallies. Social and indigenous organizations denounced Tuesday the police's repressive actions against protesters. The confederations of indigenous nationalities announced they will continue mobilizing and informed that they expect the arrival in Quito of other organizations to join the rallies to demand that President Guillermo Lasso attends to the demands made by the indigenous organizations' rights. Defenders' organizations called on the national government to stop the state violence. On this issue, the Alliance for Human Rights, an NGO created during the protests, warns that on Tuesday morning police forces threw tear gas bombs in the reception and humanitarian aid area of the Salesian Polytechnic University in Quito. The organization also reports that during the 9 days of demonstration, there have been 39 human rights violations, 79 arrests, and 55 wounded as a result of police repression against protesters. Police repression in Quito extends not only to institutions but to all open and public venues. These images correspond to the vicinities of Patria Avenue, where police officers continue to repress demonstrators using full gear and devices to repel the protests. Let's watch. The disproportionate use of force by military and police forces deployed under the orders of President Lasso has also been felt in the southern region of Ecuador. The indigenous and rural communities of the parish of Tarqui in Cuenca denounced a military attack. The troops are said to have fired on children and women who were present. According to those affected, the fighting went on for more than half an hour. One member of the community is reported to have been arrested. The trade union movement in Uruguay goes on strike and organized a caravan rally to Executive Tower against the government's privatization policies. The rally started at the headquarters of the Uruguayan oil company ANCAP, from where they marched to the tower of the Uruguayan presidency. The protesters are defending the sovereignty of the companies of the Fuel Administration Agency in the face of government policies which favor the benefits of private companies. They also denounced the insecurity of workers after it was proved that strangers were brought into the plants to sabotage work equipment, which could affect the lives of workers if they are not in optimum conditions. On Tuesday, in Guatemala's capital, anti-riot forces repressed students from San Carlos de Guatemala University. The local alternative media, Prensa Comunitaria, informed on police attacks against the students protesting against the appointment of a magistrate to the Constitutional Court by the University's Superior Council. Also, there are reports of several attacks against the press covering the confrontations. On May, Guatemalan students and teachers took over the same institution, the only school of higher education in the Central American country, as a sign of rejection to the election of Walter Mazariegos as dean, who they consider was elected in a fraudulent process and who has links with parallel entities. Supporters and opponents of abortion rights protested outside the United States Supreme Court in Washington as the 9 justices prepared to release a decision in a case that could result in overturning the 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling protecting the right to abortion. The Supreme Court is expected to deliver an opinion by the end of June that could roll back 50 years of abortion rights in the U.S. In the absence of any federal laws, it is the 1973 ruling that guarantees a woman's right to an abortion in the U.S. According to a draft leaked in May, the conservative majority on the 9-member court is prepared to overturn Roe v. Wade. A latest statistic from the Guttmacher Institute showed that more than 900,000 abortions were done in 2020, an increase after 3 years of steady decline. Meanwhile, the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention stated that 92.2% of abortions in the country take place in the first trimester.
Currently, it doesn't look like the U.S. is headed in a good direction. The government seeks to control our bodies. They seek to control us and stop us from living free lives full of choice, where we get to decide the outcome and the fate of our lives. And we do not agree with that. We are very against that, and we'll fight for everybody's rights to make sure that this country doesn't fall into fascism.
In Mexico, authorities of the National Meteorological System report that tropical depression Celia has left its mark in areas of Oaxaca, Chiapas, Tabasco, and Veracruz. The institute warns that the storm keeps moving westward at 20 kilometers per hour, which will bring heavy rains to the south of the country, according to the latest report. Celia was located approximately 405 kilometers south of Puerto Angel and 485 kilometers south-southwest of Salina Cruz in the state of Oaxaca. The report says rainfall could overflow rivers and streams and cause floodings. Meteorologists urge the population to heed weather warnings and follow the authorities' indications. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Former Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva and former Governor Geraldo Alckmin, running mates for the next presidential election by the Let's Go Together for Brazil movement, presented the guidelines of their government program. The document was drawn up on the basis of a broad understanding among representatives of the 7 parties that make up the movement. It was structured around social and economic development, rights guarantee, social, environmental, and climate sustainability, defense of democracy, reconstruction of the state, and sovereignty. Both set up a virtual platform entitled Together for Brazil, which will be officially introduced in Sao Paulo, and it will remain open for about 30 days for people to submit their suggestions while holding debates, forums, discussions, and consultations across the board. In Colombia, in compliance with the peace agreement signed in 2016, on Tuesday begins the hearing for the recognition of responsibilities of the former FARC guerrillas before the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. 7 members of the last FARC leadership appeared before the GEP after the Truth Recognition Chamber charged them with war crimes and crimes against humanity in the 01 macro case. The hearing is taking place in the Virgilio Barco Library in Bogota, and among the topics to be discussed is the policy of kidnapping for the purpose of a prisoner exchange, a policy that affected military, police, politicians, and other important figures. In this sense, the Common Party, former FARC, announced that in their commitment to peace in Colombia, the last representative of the FARC AP will appear before the GEP.
I repeat that we have come here as the last secretariat of the disappeared FARC EP, and as Rodrigo Londoño Echeverri, in my role as the last commander, to assume our individual and collective responsibility for one of the most abominable crimes committed by our organization, the result of a policy that led to crimes against humanity and war crimes, as well as acts and conducts qualified and determined by the court as going against the values and principles that proclaimed and inspired our struggle.
On Tuesday, Bolivian authorities, led by the president of the plurinational state, Luis Arce, celebrated the Andean, Amazonian, and Chaco New Year of 5530, in which they advocated for the unity of the South American country. Arce, who took part in the ancestral ceremony in Tiwanaku, an archaeological complex 70 kilometers from the city of La Paz, said he hoped that this day will be the beginning of a successful and healthy year for Bolivians. Accompanying Arce were former president and indigenous leader Evo Morales, Vice President David Chocohuanca, representatives of diplomatic missions, local authorities, and the Bolivian people. At least 222 ceremonial sites of the indigenous peoples of the national territory celebrate on Tuesday the Andean, Amazonian, and Chaco New Year, which coincides with the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere and the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. The date is a national holiday since 2009 under the government of then-President Evo Morales. Bolivian President Luis Arce held an important meeting with the leaders of the Cochabamba Tropic. Unity was the theme of the meeting to strengthen political instruments for the sovereignty of native peoples. The event, attended by indigenous leaders and former President Evo Morales, addressed a series of concerns raised by the Sixth Federation of the Cochabamba Tropic relating to economic productivity, social health, education, and transport issues, among others. The threats against the progressive government and the structure of the movement towards socialism were also discussed at the meeting. Evo Morales thanked President Arce, saying the meeting helps consolidate unity. Bolivian President spokesman Jorge Richards seconded Evo Morales' words and said this meeting is only the first of more to come.
We have been studying issues. We have formed working commissions. We will continue the dialogue on a date yet to be defined. Progress has been made. The executive branch has answered to specific and concrete issues, especially relating to the economy. With reactivating the economy, this meeting is just a starting point. As I said, this is a process, and in the next few days, we will be agreeing when the next meeting will be held.
And China reported 12.1% annual growth in trade with BRICS member countries. The Chinese Customs General Administration detailed that trade relations with the emerging bloc total $196 billion with an increase of 18 points in exports of Chinese products and an increase of 6.6 points in imports from the BRICS members. Likewise, the authorities of the Asian giant reported that during 2021, the trade volume exceeded $490 billion, a figure higher than obtained during 2020. Meanwhile, Beijing announced that it will host the next summit of the head of state members of the group of emerging countries on 23rd and 24th June. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. Britain's railway workers began the biggest strike in more than 3 decades as the cost of living caused by surging inflation risked wider industrial action. More than 50,000 members of railway union will walk out for the 3 days this week. Mick Lynch, RMT General Secretary, described as unacceptable offers of below-inflation pay raises by both overground train operators and London Underground. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said the government was doing everything it could to minimize effects, but told Parliament that around 20% of planned services will operate. The strikes risk causing significant disruption to major events, including the Glastonbury Music Festival, as well as national exams. The union argues the strikes are necessary as wages have failed to keep pace with UK inflation, which has hit a 40-year high and is on course to keep rising. In Belgium, citizens took to the streets of the capital, Brussels, to protest at the rising cost of living. Under the slogan of more respect, better wages, and an end to excise taxes, over 70,000 mobilized workers demanded government intervention to address soaring living costs amid inflation that reached 9% in June, reflecting sharp rises in other countries, triggered mainly by the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and its impact on supply chains and energy prices. To try to contain inflation, the government has extended the reduction in sales tax and gas, fuel and electricity until the end of the year. In a report issued on Tuesday, the United Nations Global Fund for Education in Emergency and Protected Crisis, Education Cannot Wait, stated that the number of children forced out of school or who have seen their education disrupted in conflict countries has nearly tripled in 6 years to more than 200 million.
Released today a study that estimates shockingly the number of 222 million children and youth whose education is disrupted in these countries. 222. When Education Cannot Wait was created at the World Humanitarian Summit, in Istanbul in 2016, the estimated number stood at 75 million, of whom 39 million were girls. We now see 222 million. And for this is the highest number, record high, historically highest number ever.
Russian President Vladimir Putin promised to further develop the country's armed forces and said that the first Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile will enter into service later this year. The head of state assured that this work will be carried out taking into account potential military threats and risks based on the lessons learned of modern armed conflicts. President Putin also noted that authorities will continue to equip their armed forces with new weapon systems that will determine the Army's combat capabilities in the coming year. The United States military is conducting world drills near the disputed area of Western Sahara in exercises organized jointly with Morocco. According to the United States Command in Africa, more than 7,000 troops from 9 countries and enough Atlantic Treaty organizations are taking part in exercises under the codename African Lion, which began on June 8th. In such maneuvers due to conclude on February 24th, rockets were fired near Western Sahara, Navy ships patrol off the coast of Spain's Canary Islands, and Air Forces conducted training exercises. For his part, the Moroccan Prime Minister Saad Eddine El Othmani said on his social networks that the event marked the beginning of U.S. recognition of the Moroccan Sahara. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman began a two-day visit to Egypt, kicking off a regional tour extending to Jordan and Turkey. The Crown Prince met with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, a major ally, to discuss regional and wider international political affairs. According to information provided by Saudi officials, several agreements were drafted during the Crown Prince's regional tour, notably in the energy sector. Prince Mohammed will head to Turkey on Wednesday. The Crown Prince's regional tour came weeks ahead of a visit to Saudi Arabia by United States President Joe Biden, whose administration has lately sought to repair ties with Riyadh, despite him earlier calling the kingdom a pariah state. Lebanon, Egypt, and Syria signed an agreement on Tuesday to import Egyptian gas to a power plant in northern Lebanon through Syria. The deal would increase badly needed electricity supply in Lebanon, which is suffering under a severe energy crisis and constant power outage. The agreement still needs to be signed off by the World Bank, which is supposed to finance the process. Experts have finished renovation work on the pipeline, which has been ready for months. Lebanese Energy Minister Walid Fayyad said that about 650 million cubic meters of gas will be brought to Lebanon through the pipeline annually to the Deir Ammar power station in the north. Fayyad added that the amount will lead to the production of more than 400 megawatts of electricity, adding 4 hours of electricity supplies for a day.
It's a historic moment today. We signed the contract of purchase of natural gas from the Arab Republic of Egypt and a contract from the transportation and trade of gas through the Arab gasoline pipeline with Syria and Egypt, our brotherly countries, to feed into the Deir Ammar power plant.
teleSUR expands its signal with new satellite parameters, since more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other faraway nations. These parameters are in place since June 1st in Latin America and the Caribbean, both in English and in Spanish, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. This new multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.